All right, hello everybody. This is Dale, and this is everything wrong with rural America. Now, in case you don't know, I grew up in rural America. So I grew up in the plains, middle of nowhere. High school I went to, 2 hours away from the nearest town of 100,000 people, and that town was Amarillo, Texas. So I was in a city. I lived in a small town that was 2 hours away from a city in the middle of nowhere. So that just gives you an idea. I come from the country. I come from the middle of nowhere. So as I do with all these videos, it's not to just beat up on, rural Americans. I'm going to do a video about urban Americans. I'm going to do a video about suburban Americans. But I'm going to start with rural Americans because now, a lot of our politics nowadays, people think it's along the racial lines. It's not. It's along geographical lines. That's why you can pretty much determine how much somebody is going to make, not based on their skin color, but based on what area code they grew up in. And that's just the reality. There's tons of data to back it up. It's all over everywhere. So, it's not along racial lines. It's more along geography and socioeconomic lines. So it really just depends on the zip code that you grew up in. So this video here is to just talk to my conservative brothers and sisters, because I love y'all, and explain to you why your hatred for liberals in urban America is really to your own detriment, and why you need to demand that your media provides you with all of the cool stuff going on in the world right now, because there's this huge movement amongst rural Americans that is really, really against wanting to fight back against this idea of green energy. And that is insane to me, because rural America really has more to gain from us going green than anybody else. You know why? Because rural Americans have land, and land in the future with solar panels and everything, land is energy, right? Land is energy. So rural Americans, us wanting to go green, that's a ton of money in your pockets. Talk to any farmer that was fortunate enough to have, a wind farm get built on their land. They can still farm most of the land around those wind turbines, but they're making a ton more money right now. Same thing with solar. I mean, really, with government incentives, there's not a single farmer in this country that should ever have to pay for their own electricity. They just shouldn't. I mean, you have plenty of barn roof space. You have plenty of outdoor space. Take an acre of solar panels. I mean, that's enough to power almost, or even like a fraction of an acre, like a quarter of an acre or something. I don't remember the exact math. I'll probably do a video on that. Actually, that's a great idea. But it doesn't take a whole lot of land and some energy storage for you to be able to power basically your entire house. I mean, in theory, if you had 2 electric trucks, say one for the day and one for night, I mean, if you can run your house just and charge those trucks kind of all at the same time. I mean, especially if you have, if you're a farm, if you're like a medium-sized farmer, and I'll use Millennial Farmer as an example because he's probably the one that most people know. And I actually love farming channels. I mean, I grew up in rural America. I mean, I love to watch farming channels as well because, it reminds me of growing up, and I love it. So Millennial Farmer, as an example, I think I've seen like his dad has a truck. I think he's got one newer truck and then an older truck. And, let's say, for example, that farm there has 4 electric pickup trucks, and 2 of them stay plugged in during the day and the other 2 they use during the day. Basically, with that setup and plenty of solar, they can power their entire house. Just rotate the trucks out and you can power your entire house. If you put enough solar up there to actually run your house during the day and charge a truck at the same time, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Not to mention, if, anybody out there who's ever heard of Aptera, they create this little car that is like basically a 2-seater car that can get 40 miles of range just from the sun. So if you want to talk about rural Americans being able to make a trip into the store without having to spend, $20 in gas just to go to the store to get groceries, I mean, electric power is the way to go. And sure, people might say, oh, well, I don't want to end up getting stuck and all this and that. Well, that's what the government can do, is build the charging infrastructure that we need. And in rural America, like there's no excuse for the richest country in the world to not be able to provide farmers with the same things that we provide for urban America. And honestly, Democrats want to do that. You guys are sending politicians in positions of power that block Democrats from trying to help you, from trying to save you a bunch of money. Like, look, everybody understands that it's going to be a long time before battery technology is energy dense enough or energy volumetric enough to be able to run a combine or a tractor. You know, just the amount of energy that those things burn on a daily basis, like we're not there yet. Nobody's saying that we're there yet. But just about everything else, your quads, your trucks, your skid loaders, you know, your Bobcats, all of that could all be ran on electricity and save farmers a ton of money. And the federal government could actually like literally fund or at least finance with a ridiculously low interest rate all of the installation for the solar panels. I mean, with programs, and the Democrats are perfectly fine with doing programs like that. In fact, I think those are some of the best programs that the government can do. It's programs where they provide like either interest-free or really low interest loans for people to go energy independent. But conservatives, rural America continues to send people to Washington that fight against any of this. They fight against all of that. But rural Americans, a lot of them have land, and land is energy. In the future, with renewable energy and everything, land is energy. So, you know, that's just a quick message to my conservative brothers and sisters. The number one problem with conservatives in this country is that y'all have to demand that your media, well, one, stop hating liberals, and I've done videos about that. But, a lot of the people in conservative areas that aren't really politically engaged, they're probably hating liberals a lot less than the ones that are politically engaged. But the number one problem, you know, for the conservatives is that y'all have to embrace technology. Like, technology is going to make it already has. I mean, look at the auto steer technology, you know, the AI and the cameras and the sensors and the computing technology. I mean, look how much easier that's made farming. And, well, not necessarily easier, it's still a really, really hard job, but it has made farming a lot more consistent. And it allows farmers to make roads that are a lot straighter. And it allows farmers to really, you know, save a lot of their brain capacity for all the other things involved in a farm, other than, you know, sitting there for 12 hours a day trying to make sure that your lines are straight, you know? So now that very same farmer can sit in the cab and spend a lot more majority of their time watching their implements and watching the headers and just making sure that everything else is running right, except for the tractor driving in a straight line, right? So it's made farming a lot more efficient, and with technology and with the green energy revolution, it's only going to make your lives better. It's only going to save you money, you know? So trying to fight that or sending, like, and honestly, even if you're unsure about that, don't vote for politicians that don't want it to work. Don't vote for politicians that are going to fight against all of it just because, you know, their oil producing, you know, donors don't want them to. So that's just a quick message for my conservative brothers and sisters. Again, I love y'all. I grew up in conservative America, nothing but love. It's just, there's just so many cool, I mean, sodium ion batteries, sulfur ion batteries. Oh, excuse me, still sick. Sodium ion batteries. I mean, there's all kinds. As far as grid scale energy storage, you got liquid metal batteries. You have polymer batteries. And actually, polymer batteries, I think, is going to eventually be what runs your tractors in 100 years. You know, it's going to be these polymer batteries right now, because, you know, a tractor, you know, it's more constraint on weight than it is volume. So these polymer batteries are going to be way larger than their lithium ion or sodium ion counterparts, but they're going to be a lot lighter. So, you know, for a combine or a tractor, you know, it's all right to maybe double the size of the tractor of some of its batteries, but you don't want to double the weight of a tractor. You know, that's going to sink in and create too much compaction. So anyway, there's so many cool technologies out there. I mean, there's compressed air energy storage, there's liquid, there's flow battery energy storage. There's just so many technologies out there. I mean, really right now, I mean, we're pretty close. And I mean, honestly, with a ton of investment from the government or even the private sector, or, you know, incentives from the government that spur investment by the private sector. I mean, is you can have basically is your AC condenser you have outside, is you can have a unit that's about the same footprint as that. It might be about 2 or 3 times taller, that can store enough energy to run your house for days and days and days. And the price of that stuff is just going down. It's continuing to go down. And the more the government creates an incentive for the private sector to create this stuff, the cheaper it's going to be for all of us. It's going to make all of our lives much, it's going to save us so much money. It makes our lives easier, saves us money. There are literally zero downsides to it. So if you're in if you're in a conservative area, like, embrace the future, you know? Like, take some time, like, just look up YouTube. There's so many cool technologies out there that your media is just not going to tell you about because it doesn't fit the narrative. You know, and I'll say the same thing about liberals. There's some things out there they don't know about because it doesn't fit their media's narrative either. But on the right, it's like institutionally a problem that your media does not tell you about any of the cool stuff going on, because, you know, the future's coming, whether you want it or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether you like it or not. The future is coming, and it's right around the doorstep. And, you know, we're right at a point in mankind's history where we're at the turning point, where this green revolution right here, it's going to create a ton of wealth. It's going to create a ton of jobs. It's going to save people a ton of money, because eventually, you know, AI and the robots is going to take over. Eventually, it's going to take over. So every human being needs to be able to be as self-sustaining as far as energy as possible. And the green revolution is what's going to create that. So that's just my opinion. Love y'all. Have a good night.